he managed to break out of a facility that had been considered escape-proof for decades.
To escape means overcoming layer after layer of impenetrable walls and an army of guards that outnumber the inmates almost 2 to 1.
Have you ever heard about people breaking out of prison and thought, wow, that sounds like something out of a movie? Well, I used to think the same until I stumbled upon some real stories that blew my mind. Believe it or not, there are crazy true tales where people locked up in jail have found ways to escape. Here are 10 successful prison escapes that happened. 10. Public enemy number 1. Have you ever come across the name John Dillinger? This guy made quite the name for himself, though, for reasons not exactly praiseworthy. During the Great Depression, he was tagged as public enemy number 1, which means he was the top bad guy in the eyes of the law back then. Starting, Dillinger wasn't into anything too heavy. After he quit high school, he started small, like swiping stuff from stores and taking cars that didn't belong to him. But life took a sharp turn after he left the Navy and went through a quick marriage. He decided petty theft wasn't enough for him. He stepped up his game and decided to rob a store owner, but got caught, which landed him a 9-year stint in jail. But jail didn't stop him. When he got out in 1933, he wasn't interested in going straight. Instead, he formed a gang and went back to robbing banks, making off with more than $30,000, which was a fortune back then. His criminal exploits were so notorious that they caught the attention of J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI. This turned the manhunt into something the whole country watched. Dillinger was eventually caught in Arizona and sent back to Indiana. He was put in a jail that everyone thought was impossible to escape from. But Dillinger proved them wrong by making a daring escape using a fake gun made out of wood. He managed to grab 2 real guns, trick the guards, take the sheriff's car, and disappear, sparking a massive search. But like all stories, Dillinger's had an ending. On July 22, 1934, the law finally caught up with him. His life story was like a series of daring crimes, narrow escapes, and a dramatic end. 9. Alexander Salonic. Now here is our other guy, Alexander Salonic, who started his career as a police officer but ended up on a completely different path. Salonic had some great skills, like being really good at shooting and fighting, which made people think he might have been trained by the Soviet military at some point. His life took a wild turn when he became a hitman, working in the shadows of the Russian criminal world. Salonic's life was just non-stop action from the start. Like, there was this one time he literally jumped out of a window to escape a courtroom. Can you believe that? And if that's not wild enough, in 1990, he broke out of jail by squeezing through a ventilation system. This guy was like a real-life Houdini. He kept dodging the law and continued his secret hitman work until he got caught again in 1995. Even in prison, his story didn't stop. The mob valued him so much that they actually helped him escape from a highly secure detention center known as Matroskaya Tishina. They bribed a guard and sneaked in some tools for him to break out. Once again, Salonic vanished into the underworld. But, as it often happens with people living on the edge, Salonic's story came to a tragic end in Greece in 1997. One of his own turned against him and killed him in a fancy mansion. His death was as dramatic as his life, marking the end of his notorious career. What's fascinating about Salonic is that he's the only person to have ever escaped from that particular Russian detention center. 8. Papon. Quick one. Does the name Henri Charrière ring a bell? Well, you might know him better as Papillon because of the unique butterfly tattoo he had on his chest. Papillon used to be in the Navy, but later he got involved in some shady activities like breaking into safes and joining gangs. In 1931, things took a major turn for him when he was wrongly accused of killing a guy named Roland Legrand. Papillon was sure he didn't do it and blamed a faulty legal system for his troubles, insisting he was innocent all along. But his story didn't stop at being wrongly convicted. No, that was just the start. He was sent to a very tough prison colony in Cayenne, French Guiana. Papillon wasn't the type to give up, though. In 1933, Driven by both bravery and desperation, he made a bold move to escape with some other prisoners. They managed to sail 2,000 miles to Colombia on a small boat, showing just how determined he was. Freedom, though, was tricky for Papon. He briefly got caught again, but didn't stop trying to escape. With the help of a storm, he got away once more and ended up with an indigenous tribe in the Guajira Peninsula, who gave him a place to stay for a while. Even after being caught several more times and facing tough times in solitary confinement, Papon's spirit never broke. By 1944, he built a raft from coconuts, proving his resolve to be free again. This bold move got him to the coast of Guyana, but he ended up in prison again for another year before he finally made it to Venezuela, where he got to start over. 7. Escape from the Rock. On June 12, 1962, something pretty wild happened at Alcatraz, which was this super secure prison on an island near San Francisco. People called it the Rock because it was surrounded by really cold and rough waters, making it seem very impossible for anyone to get away. The guy who came up with the escape plan was Frank Morris. He was brilliant and had been in trouble with the law before. He teamed up with John and Clarence Anglin, plus another guy named Alan West. Together, they came up with a plan that's still talked about. They spent months making the air vents in their cells bigger, using spoons and saw blades, and they were sneaky about it, with Morris playing the accordion to hide the noise they were making. But they didn't stop with just making a hole in the wall. They also made a raft out of raincoats, which is pretty clever if you think about it. To make sure the guards didn't catch on too quickly, they made fake heads out of papier-mâché and left them in their beds to look like they were asleep. On the night they decided to go for it, though, Alan West couldn't get out because his vent wouldn't open. Morris and the Anglin brothers managed to get through the tunnel, up to the roof, and down to the shore. There, they put their raft in the water and took off into the night. What happened to them after that is still a mystery. Officially, the FBI thinks they didn't make it and drowned in the bay, but there are stories and some evidence that suggest they might have pulled it off and lived to tell the tale. Their sisters and others believe they made it out alive, turning the whole thing into a legend that people are still talking about. 6. Stalag Luft 3 escape. During World War II, there was this prison called Stalag Luft 3, right in the middle of all the fighting. This place was super secure and famous for keeping a tight lid on Allied soldiers. But in 1944, something incredible happened there. 76 soldiers decided they'd had enough and were going to make a run for it. But here's the thing. They didn't just wake up one day and decide to escape. They had been planning this for over a year, and about 600 prisoners were in on it. They had this wild plan to dig 3 tunnels, which they called Tom, Dick, and Harry. These tunnels ran up to 30 feet deep, designed to go under the prison fences and come out in the forest for a clean getaway. Building these tunnels was a big deal. They used wooden blocks to keep them from collapsing, set up lights so they could see, and even made a pump to keep fresh air flowing. They also gathered civilian clothes and made fake passports to blend in once they got out. On March 24, 1944, they were ready to go, but things didn't go exactly as planned. The tunnel they chose came up short, leaving them exposed and much closer to the guards than they hoped. Still, 76 guys managed to crawl through it and into the night. Unfortunately, the 77th guy got caught, and that was the end of that. The guards found the tunnel and went after them. In the end, all but 3 were caught again. Even though most of them got caught, the story of their escape, called The Great Escape, became legendary. 5. Pascal Patt. In the skies of France, there's this unbelievable story about Pascal Patt, and it's not because he's famous for winning any awards. Patt is known for managing to escape from prison not just once, but 3 times. Originally, he was put in Luynes prison for a murder connected to a robbery that went wrong. But Patt wasn't the kind to just sit back and accept his situation. His first big escape happened in 2001. Here's how it went down. Patt figured out a way to use the exercise yard on the prison's roof to his advantage. Now, get this. A buddy of his actually piloted a helicopter right onto the prison roof. Patt just hopped in and off they flew. It's hard to believe, right? But that was just the beginning for him. Believe it or not, Patt went back to Luynes prison, but this time to help 3 of his buddies escape using a helicopter again. However, they didn't stay free for long, and Patt found himself back in prison with even more time added to his sentence. Then, in 2007, Patt pulled off another escape, this time from Grass Prison. 4 people wearing masks took a helicopter from an airport by force, flew to the prison, picked up Patt, and off they went. They landed somewhere near the Mediterranean Sea and disappeared. However, freedom was not to last. Patt was caught on September 21, 2007, in Mataró, a town near Barcelona, Spain. He, along with 2 accomplices, was handed over to French authorities on October 4, 2007. For security reasons, his new prison location was kept secret. On June 25, 2008, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of early release for a series of armed robberies and attacks on police officers during his time on the run. Then, on April 8, 2011, Patt received an additional 5-year sentence for his 2007 escape. His 3 accomplices also received sentences ranging from 6 to 9 years. Others deemed complicit in the escape were given lighter sentences. And just like that, Patt and his Hollywood-like escapes made him a story people would talk about for a long time. 4. The Maze Prison Break. Back in 1983, there was this incredible story about the Maze Prison Break, which is still one of the most jaw-dropping escapes ever. Now get this. There was this high-security prison in Europe designed to keep the toughest of the tough locked up, including fighters from the Irish Republican Army, IRA. Everyone thought it was impossible to escape from there. But then, 35 prisoners led by IRA members Jerry Kelly and Bobby Story proved everyone wrong. And now, for a fact, they spent months planning every single detail. They even got guns smuggled into the prison. Using those guns, they took control of a part of the prison and grabbed some guards' uniforms. And they didn't stop there. They managed to get a vehicle and drove right up to a guard post as part of their escape plan. Now, you might think they'd just speed through the main gate, right? Nope, that was too hard to break through. So they switched up their plan on the fly. They decided to climb over the fence instead and then made a run for it. 35 of them got out, but unfortunately, 16 were caught pretty quickly after. During the escape, 20 guards got hurt. The Maze Prison Break not only served as a morale booster for the IRA, but also had a lasting impact on the prison staff. The aftermath included the death of 1 officer, non-fatal injuries to another from shooting, stabbing of 3 other guards, beatings of 13 officers, and 42 suffering from stress-related disorders. In the wake of the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, which led to the early release of hundreds of inmates, the Maze Prison was eventually closed in 2000. The H-blocks, a part of the prison demolished in 2006. This whole escape story sounds like something you'd read in a book, right? It shows how determined some people can be to get their freedom back. 3. A 15-year-old boy was sentenced to life imprisonment. Leonard Moses was just 16 years old when he got caught up in the intense riots in Pittsburgh back in 1968, right after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. During those riots, he made a huge mistake by throwing Molotov cocktails into a woman's house. Sadly, the woman, Mary Amplo, later died from pneumonia because of her burns. Because of this, Leonard was put on trial for murder and ended up getting a life sentence. But things got a bit more tangled later on. His case was looked at again by a higher court in Pennsylvania in 1971. His lawyers argued that when he admitted to what he did, he shouldn't have, because he was too young to really understand everything, including his rights. The higher court actually agreed that he should have a new trial to fairly decide his case. However, before this new trial could happen, Leonard was allowed to go to his grandmother's funeral. During that time, He saw an opportunity and ran away. Just like that, he vanished. For almost 50 years, Moses managed to stay hidden. He changed his name to Paul Dixon and lived a new life as a pharmacist. But in 2020, while he was in Michigan, he got caught stealing prescription pills. When they checked his fingerprints, they figured out who he really was. This ended one of the longest periods anyone has ever managed to avoid getting caught in the US too. El Chapo's escape plan. Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo, which means shorty, wasn't very tall, standing at just 5'6". But don't let his height fool you. The biggest names in the world of illegal drugs. Born on April 4th, 1957, El Chapo kicked off the Sinaloa cartel in the mid-1980s. He didn't just make small ripples in a pond, he turned the Sinaloa cartel into a name that people everywhere either respected or feared. But what really made him famous, or infamous rather, were his incredible escapes from high-security prisons. Like, there was this one time in January 2001 when he had his first major breakout from Puente Grande prison. He managed to get out by bribing guards and sneaking away in a laundry cart, but that was just the start. His most jaw-dropping escape happened in July 2015 from Altiplano Federal Prison. This time, he got out through a tunnel that began right under his cell's shower. This wasn't just a simple hole in the ground. It had lights, ventilation, and even a motorcycle on rails to help him get through it quickly. The tunnel stretched for nearly a mile and ended at a house outside the prison. However, El Chapo's freedom didn't last long. He was caught 6 months later in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. This led to him being sent to the United States, where in July 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison. 1. 7 inmates on the run. In the late 2000s, there was this escape story that's hard to believe. The main characters, a group called the Texas 7. These guys, on December 13, 2000, pulled off an incredible escape from a high-security prison called the John Connolly Unit, not far from a small town called Kennedy in South Texas. Their plan was bold and really well thought out, surprising everyone who heard about it. These 7 inmates were really smart and fast. They took over by taking 9 civilian workers, 4 guards, and 3 other inmates who had no clue about the plan by surprise, locking them up so they wouldn't ruin their escape. And guess what? They chose 11:20 a.m. to make their move, because the prison was a bit more relaxed during lunchtime. They sneaked up on their captives, tied them up, and hid them in an electrical room. They also took their clothes, credit cards, and IDs to help them blend in, pretended to be prison officers on the phone, making up stories to avoid getting caught. They left in a prison truck, driving right out of there, but their freedom didn't last long. From January 21st to 23, 2001, a TV show called America's Most Wanted helped catch them. In the end, the law caught up with them, and most of the Texas 7 ended up on death row, facing the consequences of their escape. Which of the 10 successful prison escapes fascinated you the most? Share with us which breakout stories truly captured your attention in the comments below, and don't forget to return for more captivating tales.